When does a single holding in my portfolio get just too big and too dangerous in a sense? I have a big concentration in a single tech company stock that for who I work for.
Okay, so this actually comes up quite a bit here because a lot of these companies have done fantastic. So if you work at one of these big tech companies and you have, you know, a lot of stock, you probably were given some stock, could buy some at a discount. Basically, they got
Yeah.
all kinds of purchase programs, and I always try to encourage people to get involved in those. And so here's the thing: I remember, client situation. Worked at a company, um, and over the years, he'd run into a lot of different brokers and advisors that said, sell it, it's too much, and all this type of stuff. And he ignored that, and now he has it vacillates, but in that kind of $6 to $10 million range of that stock. And of course, this is a success story, and the other times where things didn't work out have to be considered. If you had a
Yeah.
million and then the stock and the company disappeared during the dot-com bubble, boy, that was crazy. There was a lot of really wild scenarios that happened. So you kind of have to take a look at the company. Are you talking about, one of these big companies that has very little chance of going out of business? That's one thing. If it's a small company that's just had a hot run, maybe you take some more money off the table. But what we advocate is what I call the fruit tree concept. And what you do is you identify a dollar amount that you feel is amount that you really want to keep in this stock. It could be a million, it could be 10 million. There's some dollar amount. So when it gets over that, you take it off the table.
Hmm.
And so let's say it's $1 million and it grows to 1.2 million. Well, you take the $200,000 out and you put it in a more diversified portfolio. You still have the million. It grows again to 1.2 million. You take the 200,000 out, right? And that way, if it drops down, to 500,000 or something, okay, good, you hold on to it and it gets back up. So again, you do that with 10 million, you do it with whatever it is. You pick, and that's your tree. And that tree is going to continue, if it works, to produce fruit. And so I think it's splitting the difference between holding on to it and not doing any diversification and then having something crazy happen. I mean, the thing that strikes me, like Silicon Valley Bank went out of business here, there's some founders and some company executives that probably had a tremendous amount of that stock,
Yep.
right? Could even be tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. And when that company, the run on the bank happened and it was seized by the FDIC, that stock went to zero.
Hmm.
So if you had $100 million in that, you now have zero. So now, that's not the best example because a bank is a weird institution, especially in today's world,
Hmm.
because you can, with a cell phone, move your money out of a bank now. And, there's services that move money for these big firms. And so, however, it does bring home the point that, almost any place can have problems. I mean, GE, right, dropped 90% from high to low at one point. So now coming back, it's having a good year. But boy, that was a long ride down. We're seeing 3M, right? Fantastic company went from really from a 300 and something dollars down to 90 something dollars, right? It's back up again to 103 or whatever. But you know anything can have problems, so that's where you want to kind of use this fruit tree concept. You just keep pulling pieces off, diversify out, and I think that's the best way to split the difference. You're going to have to pay tax on that, so ideally you're doing it with pieces that have been in the long-term capital gain arena, right?
Hmm.
So you've had them for at least a year. You do those lots, pick those pieces out if you're going to sell. Long-term capital gains are maximum of 20%, right? So that's not terrible. Not great, but still, it's better because you can lose 20% in a single stock, a tech stock, in a week. So it's just a matter of trying to kind of pick off those pieces, diversify some a little bit at a time, and so that's I think that's the best strategy personally, and we've had some success with that.
Yeah, and we can always test if you have a plan. You can always test. What happens if the stock goes to zero? What does
Yeah.
that affect my probability like success? And at a certain point, you can say, "Hey, I know if I don't believe in this company anymore, or something changes. If there's a structural change, then you have to augment your strategy. You can't just keep your strategy forever, too."
Yeah, we can actually test out like how big your fruit tree should be, right? I mean, we can stress test and say, okay, what happens if this big holding you have drops 50%? Nothing, good. That's, above what you need. But if it really makes a big change to your probability of success, then, we can find that level where you should be starting to diversify, um, and allowing for some drop of that stock. If you have $1 million and that works great, and we run it at 500,000 and it doesn't, then you might want to make your fruit tree $1 million.
Yeah.
Give yourself a 50% drop capability, and you take the money off the top of that $1 million. So that's how I would look at it. It's the best way to answer it is inside of a plan that does Monte Carlo simulation, to figure out what you can afford. And it depends on what other assets you have, what you're spending. And so it's a much more intelligent way to answer that question. But yeah, it's a good question. It comes up a lot for us here in Silicon Valley.